thing is working. We always have to try out the sound because it isn't. Yeah. We always have to try out the sound. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Miglosh for the WDMA and also talking about faith in business. Okay, so last week, or we tried, or the last time we talked a little bit about my dear wife and what a contribution she's made, but I was thinking about, my early days as a consultant. There's a whole rack of, not a rack, but there's 4 or 5 catalogs up on the wall there that I had the privilege of helping found, and some of them did very well. And so I wanted to talk about the catalog business a little bit. I had some background in design, some background art, some in printing. I had sold printing for a while and screen printing, and also small format multi-lith stuff. And oftentimes I would lay out a brochure and write the copy and tell the artist this is what I think it should look like, and show it to the small business, and they'd go, great. I didn't know people got paid to do that. I just went with it because it sold the printing. And so I ended up in industrial sales and started working as a marketing consultant. And I helped launch a computer supplies catalog, and I seem to have sort of it's just a curiosity, I would say. And my very first assignment, I was told by somebody with much more experience that I should proportion the pages and the items in the page according to the competitive analysis. And so we counted up the pages, and some of the catalogs that we compared ourselves to, we were going to do a 48-page catalog, but some of them were like 400 pages. And in those days, they had things like media safes where you'd put your big floppy disks, and some of them were big, or your mag tapes or that sort of thing. And you could adequately show a media safe in a double-page spread, but when you scaled a 400-page catalog 2 pages down to 10% of that, you were, in a little spot like that. There's no way you could portray it. And so I explained to my supposed mentor, it just doesn't work. You can either sell these or not sell them, but you can't squish them down into that size. It just won't work. And so we had some quite vigorous discussions about that, and I think I was right. I'm sure I was right. They didn't have any more catalog experience than I did, but I didn't know that. And same thing with inventory. We were selling computer report binders, and in those days there was a wide variety of paper that you could use, and so there was a wide variety of styles of binders. You would print out on these whole, it would chain print through with spokes that would drive the paper through the printer. And then when it got done, you'd have a big stack of paper like that, and you could run like wires through there and put them around the back and slide these things over, and it would create these binders. And we used to have binders everywhere because we didn't have PDFs or anything like that. And so there were like a variety of maybe 200 binders. And they told me to proportion the inventory equally across the 200 binders, 200 varieties of binders. And I started trying to do that, and it just didn't work. I called up the vendor and I said, what are your top selling binders? And they gave me about a dozen or 2 dozen that were their top sellers. And so I put all the inventory into those items, and then I got in trouble. And so the guy overseeing my work said, you didn't do what I said. You didn't proportion it equally. Most of these items, you don't have any inventory at all. And I said, yes, that's true. But given our minimums and the boxes, there's 10 binders in a box, your method doesn't give us enough to ship 1 box of binders. Not even 1 order. So at least we could back order the stuff if we do it my way. Anyway, that one I did win, and thank heaven. But anyway, so I had just this flair for causing trouble. And so as the couple of years went by, and I had helped launched about 5 or 6 catalogs, and got a pretty good feel. I had this knack for understanding numbers and also understanding layout design, which is rare. I didn't realize how rare it was until I started trying to teach employees. And then it came up that my boss, Vic Hunter, not the one who was giving me that bad advice, Vic would have understood that better, but he had run dropship catalogs, not inventoried catalogs, so he didn't have a lot of experience in that either. But anyway, he was asked to give a speech or two at the Direct Mail Marketing Association, DMMA, which became the DMA, which became the Data and Marketing Association, and then went under and was bought by AMA, which I predicted when they changed it. When they moved away from mail and moved away from direct marketing, I suggested that they no longer had any distinctiveness at all. But anyway, I was asked to speak on catalog inventory management, I think. And so I actually knew something about it, and I was on the docket with a guy named Joe Popolo, which I looked up for this, and I found out that he died just only a little over a year ago. Because I was working with him back in the 80s. And God bless, man, oh man. And he and I became pretty good friends, but I haven't heard from him in many, many years. And he had been the founder of Misco Computer Supplies, which was a catalog business. And the way he got started, he was working for Raytheon, and he built some of the guidance systems for NASA's moon landing, which is, very, very, at the time was very, very innovative, because the computers that they had to work with were, you have more computers in your wristwatch than they did guiding that whole space program. So Joe was a smart guy, and he was then working for a big computer company. And they saw this rise in the smaller computers, and they sold hard drives and paper and supplies to their users. And they said, could we build a computer supplies catalog? And he did a study, and he said, well, you could, but the average order size is only like $200. And they said, well, we can't take an order less than 5,000. We just aren't set up for that. And he agreed that they probably couldn't. And so he put some money together and started a company that could. And I think he started by selling, partly at least, to their customers, and everybody was happy about it. And that became Misco. And about the time that he and I did this talk together, he had sold 40% of the company to Gillette, who was just interested in something that they could invest in that was low risk, high growth. And we were each given like 20 minutes to talk, and I had probably 30 slides. In those days, I would actually drape a black cloth over my head and had a tripod with a remote trigger on the camera so it wouldn't jiggle. And I would bring up slides on my computer built in Lotus 123 graphs, right? And I would float the type over the graphs where I would hide the lines and charts, and I would zoom in a little bit. This was before Harvard graphics or any of that stuff, or PowerPoint. And the slides were like $6 or $7 a piece, and by the time you got them back, you didn't know if you're going to get the right stuff. So this way I could just take them to the Walgreens and get them developed like same day or two, couple of days, and I could do them for cheap. And so he was supposed to do 20 minutes. I think he did like 35 of our 40. And I learned what it's like to give give talks. Anyway, God bless him. But we became friends. And back when I started working on catalogs, where does the faith come in? Well, back when I started working on catalogs, I realized that it was quite an endeavor to build something like, the computer supplies catalog I worked on was prior, and we required that they test at least 250,000 in the first drop. And we did at least 4 drops. So it's 1 million catalogs, and so just with the printing and postage, that was probably $500,000 off the top, plus our consulting fees. And we then set up systems with the software that Vic had developed to take their orders, because their order processing wasn't geared up for $200 orders, just like Joe found out. And so, why do you put out a couple of $1,000,000 without knowing what's going to happen? And we'll talk about that next time. But there's an element of faith. And there's an element of faith in there. And what I've learned since is I had dinner with Robert Kiyosaki a couple times, and he has a quadrants like employee, small business, and then there's large business, and then there's investor. And I said, Robert, it intrigues me why there's so few people on the other side of your quadrants. And I said, it seems to me it's because it takes faith. It takes faith to launch a business. It takes faith to launch a catalog. And most people don't have faith, not much. And I see that today in the digital world. They say, oh, direct mail is so slow. But what if you can really learn things? What if you can really learn things for sure? What if I can tell you not only who bought or who clicked, but I can tell you who engaged with your advertising and didn't buy and didn't tell you anything. I can tell you the differences between those who did and those who didn't, and know that both were engaged in looking over your stuff. You can't do that with digital. You don't know if they're paying attention or not. I can't tell you how many digital ads I saw today. I know I saw some. I saw them down at the bottoms of articles or on the side panels of articles that I was looking at. Can't tell you one of them, not one. All I know is that they were there, and I know how to ignore them. But I can do that, and that takes faith. The marketing endeavor is about predicting the future. It's about looking into the future and seizing opportunities. And that's a faith exercise. So we'll talk about that next time. We'll talk about how I got into the faith, the quantifying the faith endeavor. Have a great day. Like and share. I hope you have faith in your business.